In the hushed stillness of our bedroom, the words fell from Mark's lips like a guillotine's blade. You should go to Hawaii by yourself. His voice, devoid of warmth, sliced through the air, severing the last thread of hope I clung to. My name is Emily Carter. At 30, I had believed I found stability in Mark Anderson, my partner of 6 years. But tonight, the mask fell, revealing the ugly truth. I stood there, a mix of disbelief and burgeoning fury coursing through me. Are you serious, Mark? My voice barely rose above a whisper. Our honeymoon is tomorrow, and you say this? Mark avoided my gaze, his fingers nervously drumming on the kitchen counter. I can't hide it anymore, Em. I've been seeing someone else. The confession hit me like a tidal wave, yet in the oddest way, it made sense. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the growing distance between us. How could I have been so blind? Who is she? The question escaped my lips, a part of me not wanting to know. It doesn't matter. What matters is I can't go with you. His nonchalant dismissal of our years together ignited a fire within me. The pain of betrayal was acute, but beneath it lay an ember of rage, fanned into life by his callousness. You're choosing her over me, over us? I fought to keep my voice steady. Mark sighed, a sound that spoke of annoyance rather than remorse. I guess I am. The starkness of his admission was a slap in the face. 6 years of love, companionship, and shared dreams, all reduced to nothing in a single conversation. Fine, I said, my voice laced with a coldness I didn't know I possessed. Enjoy your new life, Mark. I hope she's worth it. I turned on my heel and strode to our bedroom, each step fueled by a growing determination. If Mark thought he could discard me so easily, he was sorely mistaken. The pain he inflicted tonight wouldn't go unanswered. As I packed my suitcase, my mind raced. The honeymoon to Hawaii, a trip meant for two, now a solitary venture. A bitter laugh escaped me. Perhaps this was the universe's twisted way of granting me freedom. The night wore on, the silence of our apartment punctuated by the sound of my packing. Mark didn't come to the bedroom, nor did I expect him to. The man I loved or thought I loved was a stranger now. By dawn, my suitcase stood ready by the door, a symbolic severance of my ties with Mark. As I looked around the room, a room that once harbored dreams of a shared future, I felt a resolve solidify within me. Mark Anderson, you will regret this night. This isn't just a trip to Hawaii anymore. It's the beginning of your downfall. As the plane soared towards Hawaii, I, Emily Carter, sat gazing at the cloud-strewn sky, my thoughts a tumultuous storm. The seat beside me, meant for Mark, stood as a glaring reminder of the betrayal that had set me on this journey. In the confined space of the airplane, memories of Mark and me swirled around, mocking me with their sweetness turned sour. I remembered our first meeting, the laughter-filled dates, the day he proposed. Each memory, once cherished, now felt like shards of glass piercing my heart. But amidst the pain, a plan was taking shape. A plan not just of moving on, but of ensuring Mark felt a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on me. It was not just about revenge, it was about justice. The flight attendant's voice jolted me back to reality. Would you like anything to drink, ma'am? Just water, thank you, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. As she moved away, my phone buzzed. It was Mark. I see you're still going to Hawaii, his text read, a trace of accusation in his words. I typed back, my fingers steady. Yes, Mark, you made your choice, and I've made mine. You're being dramatic. We can talk about this when you're back, he replied, the audacity of his message igniting my anger further. There's nothing left to talk about. Enjoy your life with her. I hit send and turned off my phone. I wasn't going to let Mark disrupt my thoughts any longer. As the plane descended into Hawaii, a plan crystallized in my mind. I would use this trip not just for healing, but to set the stage for Mark's comeuppance. He would learn that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences strike where it hurts the most. I checked into the hotel, a beautiful beachfront property that should have been the setting for our honeymoon. Now it was the backdrop for the unraveling of my former life and the weaving of a new narrative. That evening, as the Hawaiian sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, I sat on the beach, my phone in hand. It was time to initiate my plan. I began with a simple post on social media, a picture of the sunset with a caption that hinted at new beginnings and unexpected turns. The post was ambiguous, but I knew it would stir curiosity among our friends and family. I wanted Mark to feel the eyes of our shared world on him, questioning, doubting. It was the first step in showing him that his actions would not remain hidden in the shadows. I spent the next few days exploring Hawaii, each activity a bittersweet experience. Kayaking, hiking, lounging on the beach, I did it all, documenting my solo journey on social media, my posts a mix of subtle jabs and overt displays of my newfound independence. One evening, as I dined alone in a cozy restaurant, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Mark's sister, Laura. "Emily, are you okay? Your posts seem off. Is everything all right with you and Mark?" I stared at the message, a part of me feeling guilty for worrying her. But this was a necessary part of my plan. Mark's facade had to crumble, and it had to start from within his circle. "Hey, Laura, thanks for checking in. Let's just say life has thrown me some unexpected curves. I'll explain more when I'm back. Hope you're well." As I sent the message, I knew it would set the rumor mill in motion. Laura, caring and concerned, would undoubtedly share her worries with others. Mark's betrayal, once a painful stab in my heart, was now the weapon I wielded with precision. In the days that followed, I felt a transformation within me. With each post, each step I took alone in Hawaii, I was shedding the skin of the woman who loved and trusted Mark Anderson. In her place stood someone stronger, fiercer, and ready to ensure that karma was not just a concept, but a reality that Mark would soon face. The Hawaiian sun cast its warm glow over the ocean, a stark contrast to the cold resolve in my heart. Emily Carter, once a believer in fairy tale endings, now played the lead in a tale of deceit and retribution. As I sipped my coffee at a seaside cafe, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. His words, filled with feigned concern, only fueled my resolve. "Emily, we need to talk. I'm worried about you." With a wry smile, I texted back, "There's nothing to worry about, Mark. I'm enjoying Hawaii, just like you're probably enjoying your time with her." His quick response, laced with frustration, didn't surprise me. "This is ridiculous, Em. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I typed, my fingers moving deftly across the screen. "Or maybe you're just beginning to realize the consequences of your actions." I hit send and turned off my phone, unwilling to let Mark's words disrupt the plan I had meticulously crafted. The cafe's serene ambiance provided the perfect backdrop for plotting my next move. It was time for Mark to feel the sting of betrayal, just as I had. Over the next few days, I executed my plan with precision. I contacted a lawyer to start the legal separation process and gathered evidence of Mark's infidelity. Every step I took was a calculated move to dismantle the life we had built together, piece by piece. One evening, as I strolled along the beach, I paused to watch a couple laughing together by the water's edge. A pang of sadness hit me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of empowerment. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the architect of my own destiny. I made my way back to the hotel and logged onto my laptop. It was time to take my plan public. I drafted a post, a beautifully worded piece that spoke of new beginnings and the courage to walk away from what no longer served me. The post was cryptic, yet its underlying message was clear. I was moving on from Mark, and I was doing it with grace and strength. Within minutes of hitting post, the responses flooded in. Words of encouragement, support, and even curiosity about what had prompted such a change. Among the sea of comments, one caught my eye. It was from a mutual friend, asking if everything was okay between me and Mark. I replied, my words carefully chosen to fuel the speculation without revealing too much. Life has a way of revealing truths we never expected. Mark and I are figuring things out. As I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. The seeds of doubt were planted, and soon they would sprout, entangling Mark in a web of his own making. The following day, as I prepared to leave Hawaii, I felt a mix of emotions. The island had been a sanctuary, a place where I rediscovered my strength, but it was also the starting point of my journey towards justice. As the plane ascended, leaving the Hawaiian shores behind, I looked out the window, my thoughts clear and focused. Mark's betrayal had set me on this path, but it was my own resilience that would see me through. I was returning home, not as the broken-hearted fiance, but as a woman reborn from the ashes of her past. Mark Anderson's day of reckoning was just beginning. Back in my hometown, the familiarity of the streets did little to soothe the tumult in my heart. The plane's descent had been a metaphorical landing back into the reality of my shattered life. But Emily Carter was no longer the same woman who had boarded that flight to Hawaii. She was now a woman on a mission. The first thing I did upon returning was to visit my lawyer. The office, with its sterile, professional ambiance, was a stark reminder of the legal battle that lay ahead. But I was ready. "Miss Carter, I've reviewed the evidence you sent over. We have a strong case for infidelity," the lawyer stated, his tone clinical. I nodded, my resolve unwavering. I want to ensure that the divorce settlement reflects the gravity of his betrayal. "We'll do everything we can," he assured me. As I left the office, my phone rang. It was Mark. His name on the screen no longer stirred feelings of love but of disdain. "Emily, where the hell are you?" Mark's voice was laced with anger and confusion. "I'm taking care of things, Mark. Something you should have thought of before cheating," I retorted, my voice calm yet icy. "This is crazy, Em. You're overreacting," he shot back. "Overreacting? No, Mark. I am reacting appropriately to a man who thought he could have his cake and eat it too," I said, my words sharp. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the cogs turning in his deceitful mind. "Let's just talk about this. We can fix it," he pleaded, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "There's nothing left to fix, Mark. You broke it beyond repair," I said and hung up. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. I reached out to our mutual friends, subtly revealing the truth behind our separation. The news spread like wildfire, painting Mark as the villain he was. I also took to social media, posting pictures and updates that showcased my newfound independence. Each post was a carefully crafted jab at Mark's ego, a public display of my resilience and his downfall. But the true masterstroke came when I decided to sell the items we had bought together. The car, the furniture, the little trinkets that symbolized our life as a couple, all were put up for sale. It was a clear message to Mark. Our shared life was being dismantled, piece by piece. The day Mark found out about the sale, his reaction was explosive. He called, his voice a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You're selling our things? What the hell, Emily? They're my things, Mark, and I'm reclaiming my life, one piece at a time," I replied, my tone unwavering. "This is insane. You're destroying everything we had," he accused. "We had nothing, Mark. You saw to that when you decided to cheat," I said, and ended the call. As I lay in bed that night, the silence of my apartment was a stark reminder of the solitude that now defined my life. But there was also a sense of empowerment, a realization that with each passing day, I was moving further away from the pain and closer to a future of my own making. Mark Anderson had thought he could break me, but in his betrayal, he had unwittingly forged a stronger, more determined Emily Carter, a woman who would not rest until she had her due. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the city as I, Emily Carter, walked through the streets with a newfound purpose. The air felt different, charged with the electricity of impending change. Today was not just another day. It was the day I would set the final act of my plan into motion. I arrived at a quaint cafe, the perfect spot to meet with an old friend and a crucial ally in my scheme against Mark. As I sipped my coffee, waiting, I reflected on how far I had come. The pain of betrayal still lingered, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce determination. "Emily, it's been too long," greeted Lisa, a mutual friend of Mark and me, and unknowingly, a key player in my plan. "Lisa, thank you for meeting me," I said, my voice tinged with feigned distress. "What's going on, Em? You've seemed off lately," Lisa inquired, her concern evident. I took a deep breath, ready to spin the narrative. "It's Mark. I found out he's been unfaithful. I'm devastated, Lisa." The shock on Lisa's face was genuine. "Mark? But he always seemed so devoted to you." "That's what I thought too. But he's been seeing someone else behind my back," I said, letting a tear slip for effect. Lisa reached out, her hand clasping mine. "I'm so sorry, Emily. How can I help?" "Just be there for me, Lisa, and maybe keep this between us. I don't want to cause a scene. I just need support right now," I said, knowing full well that Lisa's nature wouldn't allow her to stay silent. "Of course, Emily. You can count on me," she assured me. As we parted ways, I knew Lisa would spread the news, igniting the flames of my revenge. She was the perfect unwitting messenger, her social connections a network through which the story of Mark's betrayal would travel fast. Over the next few days, I watched as the effects of my carefully crafted narrative began to unfold. Our mutual friends started to distance themselves from Mark, their social media interactions with him dwindling. Whispers of his infidelity spread, tainting his reputation. Meanwhile, I continued to present myself as the wronged yet dignified ex-fiancé. My social media posts were a blend of subtle hints at my personal turmoil and showcases of my newfound independence. Each post was a calculated move in the intricate chess game I was playing with Mark's facade. Then came the day when I learned that Mark had been passed over for a promotion at work, a direct result of the rumors that now clouded his professional image. It was a significant blow, one that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. But now it was a reality, a testament to the power of reputation and the consequences of one's actions. As I sat in my apartment that evening, my phone rang. It was Mark, his voice a cocktail of anger and desperation. "Emily, what the hell have you been telling people? My life is falling apart." "Is it, Mark? Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray me," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "You're ruining me, Emily. This isn't fair," he protested. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? You cheated, Mark. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it," I said. The call ended with Mark's frustrated silence, a clear sign that my message had hit home. I lay back on my couch, a sense of vindication filling me. This was more than revenge. This was justice. Mark was finally reaping what he had sown, and I, Emily Carter, was the architect of his downfall. The cool evening breeze wafted through my apartment, carrying with it a sense of triumph. The walls, once a symbol of shared dreams with Mark, now stood as a testament to my newfound strength. I, Emily Carter, had turned the tables, and the sweet taste of revenge was more satisfying than I had imagined. As I poured myself a glass of wine, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Mark, his name flashing on the screen like a beacon of his desperation. "Emily, we need to talk. This has gone too far," he said, his voice strained. I took a sip of my wine, savoring its richness. "Talk? What's there to talk about, Mark? You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences. You've destroyed my reputation, Emily. My friends, my job, everything is falling apart because of these rumors," he accused, his voice laced with bitterness. "Rumors? Mark, the truth has a way of coming out. You can't hide from what you've done," I replied coolly. "This isn't you, Emily. This vindictiveness, it's not you," he pleaded. I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You'd be surprised, Mark. Betrayal changes people. You should know. You're the expert." The line went silent for a moment. "I'll make it right, Emily. Please, let's just put this behind us," he begged. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "It's too late for that, Mark. You've shown your true colors, and I've shown mine. This is the end of our story." With that, I ended the call, cutting off any further pleas from Mark. The sense of empowerment was exhilarating. For too long, I had been the victim of his deceit, but now I was the author of his downfall. Over the following days, I watched as Mark's social circle shrunk, his friends distancing themselves as the truth of his infidelity spread. His professional life, too, suffered, with the missed promotion being just the beginning of his career troubles. But the most satisfying part was yet to come. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned that Mark's affair partner had left him, unable to handle the public scrutiny and the reality of being with a man of tarnished reputation. Mark was left alone, a pariah in the life he had chosen over me. As I sat in my living room, the walls no longer felt oppressive. They were my sanctuary, a place where I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of a broken heart. I had taken back control of my life, and in doing so had ensured that Mark felt the full weight of his betrayal. The journey had been painful, fraught with moments of doubt and anguish. But as I looked back, I realized it was necessary. It had led me to a place of strength and independence, a place where I could finally close the chapter on Mark Anderson and look forward to a future of my own making. Emily Carter, once the betrayed fiancée, was now a woman reborn, a woman who had faced her demons and emerged victorious. The sweet taste of revenge lingered, a reminder that sometimes justice is served not in the courts, but through the actions of those who refuse to be broken. The journey of revenge had reached its end, but for me, a new chapter was just beginning. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I reflected on the transformation that had taken place. The pain of Mark's betrayal, once a consuming fire, had now dwindled to a mere flicker in the story of my life. My phone rang, breaking the morning's tranquility. It was a call from Laura, Mark's sister. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Emily, I heard about everything." Laura's voice was tinged with sadness. "I'm sorry for what Mark did to you." I sighed softly. "Thank you, Laura. It's been a tough journey, but I think it was necessary." "Mark's a mess, Emily. He's lost so much, his friends, his reputation. I never thought he'd be capable of something like this," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "I didn't either, Laura, but we often don't see the true colors of a person until we're forced to," I replied, my tone resolute. There was a pause filled with unspoken words and shared pain. "I hope you find happiness, Emily. You deserve it," Laura finally said. "Thank you, Laura. I wish the same for you," I replied, ending the call with a sense of closure. As the day progressed, I busied myself with work and plans for the future. The lessons I had learned from my ordeal with Mark had reshaped my perspective on life and love. Trust, once freely given, would now be earned, and the scars of betrayal, while healed, would always serve as a reminder of my strength. My social media, once a battleground of subtle jabs and public displays of independence, now showcased a woman embracing her new life. Photos of my travels, moments of professional success, and gatherings with true friends painted the picture of a life rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. In the weeks that followed, I heard snippets of Mark's struggles through mutual acquaintances. His attempts to salvage his reputation were met with cold shoulders, and his professional life continued to suffer. The man who once held my heart was now a mere shadow, a cautionary tale of the consequences of infidelity and deceit. But as I looked out of my window, watching the city bustle below, I realized that Mark Anderson's story was no longer mine to dwell on. I had moved on, leaving him and the pain he caused in the past. I turned my gaze to the horizon, where the sky met the cityscape in a promise of endless possibilities. Emily Carter, once a victim, was now a victor, her spirit unbroken, and her heart open to the adventures that lay ahead. The journey of revenge had ended, but my journey of self-discovery and growth was just beginning. And as I stepped out into the world, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength and resilience to face them head-on.
One day, I found myself in a situation I could have never imagined. It all started when I took my husband to the doctor for a regular checkup. What was supposed to be a routine visit turned my world upside down. Dr. Lawrence, with a grave expression, shared some shocking news about my husband. The severity in his eyes told me this was no joke. I felt a wave of panic and disbelief wash over me. My husband, who I had cared for through his illness, was now a source of fear and concern. Dr. Lawrence urged me to consider my safety, suggesting I might need to distance myself from my husband. His words left me feeling overwhelmed and scared. My name is Betty Frieden, and I'm a 50-year-old who has dedicated 10 years to working at a leading pharmaceutical company. That place has become my second home, offering comfort and a sense of belonging. Despite my age, I've continued to work full-time, earning the respect and admiration of my colleagues. Not many people my age are still working as I do, but I've never minded. My dedication to my job was partly because I remained single until 4 years ago. My manager, Gerald, and I shared a close bond, partly because we were both single. He once jokingly asked if I was ever going to get married, a comment that could have been taken the wrong way, but I knew it was all in good humor. Around that time, I was secretly seeing Richard, who would later become my husband. Richard was a bit older, previously married and divorced, and like me, wasn't interested in having children. We met through a marriage consultation service, seeking companionship for our later years. Choosing to keep our relationship private, we didn't share our plans with anyone, even as our manager made light-hearted jabs about marriage. Eventually, Richard and I tied the knot quietly, without a ceremony, simply signing the necessary paperwork at City Hall. The simplicity of the process surprised me, but I was excited for our future together. But now, faced with Dr. Lawrence's alarming advice, I was forced to reassess everything. My feelings of compassion for my sick husband were now tangled with fear and uncertainty. Dr. Lawrence's words echoed in my mind, urging me to take action for my own safety. As I stood there trying to process the situation, I realized I needed to make a decision, and fast. The life I had known and the future I had envisioned were suddenly on uncertain ground. I'm LA, and my husband Richard works at a factory. To be honest, I earn more than he does. Richard started his job there right after finishing high school. As for me, I grew up in an orphanage and always dreamt of being independent. That's why I didn't want to quit my job at the pharmaceutical company, even after we got married. I loved my job too much. When Richard and I tied the knot, I immediately told my manager, Gerald, about it. He congratulated me, but I could tell he had mixed feelings. Maybe he felt a bit lonely because I, his buddy in singleness, got married first. I tried teasing him about it, but he brushed it off, so I let the matter drop. Despite Gerald's reaction, I was over the moon about starting a new chapter with Richard. I imagined all the wonderful things our future would hold. But reality turned out to be less shiny than my dreams. Life as newlyweds was pretty standard. Not much changed for me. I kept working, and the biggest change was probably moving to a more rural area and commuting by car instead of bus. Richard and I shared my old car because he didn't have one. About a year into our marriage, though, things started to get rocky. Richard began showing signs of depression. He seemed off, hardly eating his breakfast, getting lost in his thoughts, and even getting small things like condiments mixed up. His clothes didn't match, and he became quieter at work and at home. Although I've always appreciated Richard's quiet strength, his silence became too heavy, making it feel like I was living alone. This loneliness crept up on me as I noticed these small but significant changes in him. It dawned on me that Richard might be dealing with a mental health issue. Watching someone you care about struggle without knowing how to help is incredibly hard. I decided to take Richard to a clinic that specializes in mind and body health, where he was diagnosed with depression. I had a basic understanding of depression, but hearing the diagnosis made my world feel a bit dimmer. The doctor explained that the best way to tackle depression is to address its root cause directly. However, pinpointing the exact reason for Richard's depression was challenging. He had been working at the same factory for years without any issues, and nothing significant had changed in his job. If anything, I worried that perhaps our marriage had somehow contributed to his state. During our conversations with the doctor, I assured him that we were living a content life and couldn't identify any direct pressures at home that might have led to Richard's condition. The doctor encouraged us to return if we noticed any changes or had any insights into potential causes of his depression. Despite multiple visits to the clinic, we couldn't find the root cause of Richard's distress. Over time, his depression only deepened. On his worst days, Richard would barely get out of bed, plagued by headaches or calling in sick to work. His appetite vanished, and he lost a noticeable amount of weight. Eventually, he was unable to continue working and had to leave his job. Richard felt terribly guilty for putting all the financial burden on me, but I reassured him that I was okay with working. My primary concern was his well-being. It was tough to see him so affected, and I constantly worried about him. Especially when I was at work, there was an incident where he went out and couldn't find his way back home, which made me fear he was battling not just depression, but potentially dementia as well. This possibility added to my stress when colleagues asked about how things were going. I had to admit that Richard wasn't improving. Seeing someone you love struggle so much without a clear way to help is incredibly difficult. Gerald noticed I was looking particularly worn out one day and handed me an energy drink. Drinking it made me feel a little better, and I was touched by his gesture of support. He reminded me that we're all in this journey together, and his words nearly brought me to tears. With everything going on with Richard, I hadn't realized how much stress I'd been piling up on myself. It became clear that I needed to keep myself together, or else I might break down too. So I threw myself into work, trying to maintain some normalcy in our lives. 1 year had flown by and things with Richard haven't improved. In fact, they've only gotten worse. As our third wedding anniversary approached, I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel for his condition. Then, one morning, I noticed our car wasn't where it should have been. Confused, I checked again, but the car was definitely missing. Since Richard's diagnosis, I was the only one who drove it. I hadn't used the car since the day before, which meant it should have been at home. Concerned, I asked Richard if he knew anything about where the car might be. He casually mentioned he thought it was there when he got home yesterday. I remembered he had gone out for a bit while I was at work. The doctor had suggested he try walking or jogging to help him cope. If the car was there when he returned, it must have disappeared sometime during the night. With the car gone, I had no choice but to use public transport, which made me about 10 minutes late for work. I explained the situation to Gerald, who was understanding but puzzled about the car's whereabouts. He wondered if Richard might have taken it, but I dismissed the idea given Richard's condition and his aversion to driving since falling ill. It didn't make sense. Despite Richard's occasional lapses in memory and frequent mood swings, I couldn't imagine him being responsible for the missing car. The mystery of the car added yet another layer of complexity to our already challenging situation. Right after realizing the car was gone, I didn't waste any time reporting it to the police, hoping it would turn up soon. But deep down, a nagging worry haunted me that it might be gone for good. As if that wasn't enough, something else strange occurred. On the day I was supposed to get my paycheck, I went to the bank to take out some money and noticed that my personal bank account was empty. I was taken aback. We do have a shared account, which I checked next, only to find it was also at zero. This left me completely baffled. Richard and I shared the joint account, but he had no access to my personal account, nor did he know its PIN. Yet somehow, all our savings had vanished. The cold wave of shock hit me hard, and once home, I confronted Richard. I asked him if he knew anything about the missing funds from our joint account. He seemed genuinely confused and denied knowing anything about it. Considering his state of mind due to depression, I hesitated to press further, fearing it might add to his stress. Richard, with his gaze fixed on the ceiling, seemed distant, lost in one of his frequent dazes attributed to his condition. It made me wonder if he could have actually taken money. Planning to bring this issue up with the police, I was overwhelmed by the double blow of losing both our car and our savings. The financial pinch was sharp, made worse by my lack of a family safety net. Having grown up in an orphanage with no parents to turn to for help, amidst these troubles, it was suggested that we switch Richard to a larger hospital with more resources than the small community psychiatric clinic we've been using. The clinic had reached its limits in what it could do for him and recommended a general hospital for better care. They even provided a referral letter, so we decided to make our first visit to the general hospital. Taking a taxi there, the experience was new and a bit daunting for me. Throughout the journey, Richard remained quiet, lost in his own thoughts. As we arrived at the hospital, taking a deep breath, I walked into the hospital, handing over the referral letter at the reception, bracing myself for a bit of a wait. Given it was busy in General Hospital, the lobby was crowded with patients, each waiting for their turn. After around an hour, Richard was finally called in for his consultation. While he went inside, I took out a book to pass the time. But barely had Richard entered the doctor's office when a nurse approached me. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Simmons?" she asked. I confirmed, and she mentioned the doctor wanted to see me. I was used to discussing Richard's condition, so I assumed it was a similar situation that time and followed her, albeit with a bit of anxiety. The nurse led me to a different room where I was greeted by a doctor who looked about a decade my senior, with graying hair and a kind demeanor. Before I could even settle in, I asked if this was about Richard's condition. He nodded gravely, and I prepared myself for potentially bad news. The doctor's next words took me completely by surprise, however. He urged me to distance myself from my husband, revealing that Richard had been arrested for fraud 10 years ago. My mind spun with confusion. Why was this coming up now during a routine medical visit? The doctor explained his suspicions about Richard's depression, suggesting that he might be pretending. He recounted recognizing Richard from a surgery 10 years ago, where he had treated a deep cut on Richard's leg. The revelation was jarring. Here I was, thinking we were addressing Richard's mental health, only to discover his hidden past and a possible deception about his current state. This unexpected turn of events left me reeling, trying to reconcile the caring husband I knew with the person the doctor described. When the doctor mentioned recognizing a large scar on Richard's right leg, everything started to make sense. I knew of the scar but never knew its origin, as Richard had never mentioned it. Learning that the doctor before me was the one who had treated Richard's injury years ago felt like an unbelievable twist of fate. The story unfolded further when the doctor revealed that Richard had injured himself during a dispute with his former wife, a dispute that arose because he had swindled her. He had stolen her luxury items and money. Shockingly, he had also feigned dementia during that time, manipulating his wife into lowering her guard before committing the fraud. This pattern of pretending to be ill to facilitate his deceit was appalling. Hearing about Richard's criminal past and his arrest was staggering. I hadn't looked into Richard's background before marrying him. Being alone most of my life, I was just happy to find someone willing to be my partner. The doctor's stern warning that Richard could be a danger to me sent chills down my spine. There was a seriousness in his tone that made it clear this was no laughing matter. The realization hit me hard. I had been deceived. In the days that followed, I struggled to act normal around Richard while secretly planning my next steps. I decided to set up surveillance cameras around our home to watch Richard's activities when I wasn't there. About a week later, I noticed a missing watch and bag. Reviewing the camera footage, I saw Richard leave the house with them and return later with a wad of cash, looking suspiciously pleased with himself. His demeanor did not match that of someone suffering from depression. This footage confirmed my worst fears. Richard was behind the theft of my belongings, the car, and our savings. Facing the hard evidence of his deceit was crushing. Richard had lied to and manipulated me, betraying the trust I had placed in him. It was clear that I needed to take significant action against someone who had pretended to be vulnerable and in need of care only to exploit my compassion and generosity. The realization that Richard had betrayed my trust was unbearable. I had dedicated my life to working and caring for what I thought was a sick partner. A divorce felt too insignificant a response to the depth of deception I had endured. It was clear we needed to part ways, but I wanted more than just a separation. I wanted Richard to truly understand the gravity of his actions and to make amends for the harm he had caused. With a heavy heart and tears threatening to spill, I gathered the divorce papers and meticulously filled them out with all the necessary details. The following day, pretending everything was normal, I informed Richard I'd be stepping out briefly. I had already taken a day off from work, explaining the urgency of my situation to my employer, who had agreed to my sudden leave. At the police station, I presented my case, showing the officers the footage I had captured of Richard's deceit. Initially, they were hesitant to proceed based solely on the video. However, after verifying with the pawn shop where Richard had sold the stolen items and locating my car being sold as a used vehicle, the evidence against him began to mount. It was also confirmed that he had unlawfully accessed my bank accounts, and suspicions about his feigned depression were raised. As the truth unraveled, I was overwhelmed by a complex mix of relief and sorrow. The police decided to act swiftly, given Richard's criminal history, and prepared to arrest him. Returning home with the officers in the early afternoon, I found Richard at home, visibly startled by my unexpected presence and the sight of the police. Despite the divorce papers in my hand, his attention was fixed on the officers as one of them declared his arrest for fraud. Richard protested, claiming his depression as a defense, but I knew better. The doctor from the general hospital had already shed light on the likelihood of his deceit regarding his mental health condition. In that moment, facing both the legal consequences of his actions and the end of our marriage, Richard's facade began to crumble. The decision to take this course of action was difficult but necessary to protect myself and seek justice for the betrayal and manipulation I had endured. On my recent visit to the hospital, a doctor recognized Richard from his past actions. He shared that Richard had once feigned dementia to trick his former wife and expressed doubts about Richard's current claims of depression. Despite these serious accusations, Richard remained unshaken in front of the police, dismissively denying everything. It was as if his history of deceit had prepared him for this moment, showing no sign of guilt or remorse. Richard challenged us, demanding proof of his fraudulent actions. His boldness was baffling, especially with the police right there, ready to arrest him based on solid evidence. It was a clear indication of his habitual manipulation and his underestimation of the situation's seriousness. For 4 years he had lied to me, taking advantage of my trust to steal from me and misuse my goodwill. Yet, in a twisted turn of blame, Richard suggested it was my fault for being too trusting, insulting me further. His odd audacity was astounding. I had supported him, hoping for his recovery, only to be repaid with betrayal and scorn. In that moment, my patience vanished. I declared my intention to seek legal advice and pursue alimony, urging him to face the consequences of his actions. At the police station, my outburst surprised even the officers, but it seemed to shake Richard's composure finally. As the police handcuffed him, Richard's defiance crumbled. He looked defeated, his arrogance replaced with frustration as he was led away. Watching the scene, I felt detached, as if observing someone else's life unraveling. Since the doctor's warning, nothing seemed real anymore. Yet here I was, facing the harsh truth of my situation, determined to move forward from the chaos Richard had created. Watching Richard being led away by the police felt surreal, almost like a scene from a dream. This moment marked a turning point, allowing me to envision a return to my life before the chaos of marriage engulfed it. Though a sense of relief washed over me, knowing I wouldn't spend my future under Richard's manipulative control, a wave of loneliness followed. Having waited more than 47 years to marry, the prospect of solitude once again cast a shadow over my newfound freedom. 2 months later, our divorce was finalized. The process had been slightly delayed due to Richard's arrest, but by the time everything was official, my emotions had settled, enabling me to reflect on our shared history with a clear mind. Richard's future was uncertain, facing imprisonment for his second offense. I could only hope this experience would lead him to sincerely reconsider his choices. In the wake of our marriage, which had dissolved into nothing more than a disillusioning memory, I found myself pondering my next steps over a simple lunch at work. It was then that my boss, Gerald, approached with a casual yet loaded comment as he joined me with his store-bought hot dog lunch. "I think you'd be just fine if you were with me," he remarked almost offhandedly. His words caught me off guard, and it took a moment for their full weight to sink in, leaving me momentarily flustered. "Yes, I'm serious," he added, seeing my hesitation, his tone smooth yet sincere. I was speechless, my lunch momentarily forgotten as I processed his proposition. Gerald then returned to work, leaving me to contemplate his unexpected offer. In a daze, the idea of a romantic relationship with Gerald had never crossed my mind. Yet, I couldn't deny the care and stability he had always shown me. His steady presence and responsible nature suddenly cast him in a new light. Despite my initial reaction to evaluate such matters as I continued eating, The seeds of possibility Gerald had planted began to take root, suggesting a future I hadn't dared to imagine until now. The thought of inviting Gerald out for a meal after work sparked a warmth within me, kindling a sense of hope for the future. Perhaps this was the perfect moment to embark on a new journey, to explore the possibility of happiness and companionship once again. The idea of stepping out of my comfort zone and into a new beginning with someone who had shown me kindness and support felt both thrilling and comforting. Tonight, I decided, could be the start of something new and beautiful. My sister sternly announced, "We no longer need you here. Please leave the place where you work from home. You're just living off us," with a tone that signaled she was done discussing it. My parents joined in, singing the same tune in unison. "Get out. We're tired of you and your dog always being in the way." "If that's how you feel, I'll just do what I want," I replied, my mind already plotting my next steps. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Le, a 41-year-old single woman working as a freelance web designer. I can do my job from anywhere thanks to the internet and my home setup. I have my own space to work in, and I enjoy the freedom of managing my own time. Despite loving my job, my life was disrupted 5 years ago when my parents suddenly decided to visit me without notice. As soon as they walked into my house, they began to look around and soon started a conversation that hinted at major changes ahead. "This house is quite spacious," Lisa, my mother, observed, looking around. "It almost seems like we could live here too, and there's even a spare room," my father added. It seems a waste for Lisa to live in such a big house all by herself, they declared without asking me. My parents had made up their minds in their typical manner, seeming to think moving in with me was settled without even considering what I might want. I had never planned to live with them, and I made my position very clear. "Hold on a moment. I have no desire to live with you," I said, puzzled by their assumption. "What are you even suggesting?" My father's face flushed red with anger as he sharply retorted, "You've taken over this house, claiming it was from your Uncle Michael, and you're trying to claim it as your own. There's a limit to how low you can go. I tried to set the record straight. I didn't take it over. I had a proper discussion with Uncle Michael, and he willingly transferred it to me," I explained. Despite my protests, my parents had already decided to move in. They insisted, "Our old house is falling apart, and it's no longer suitable for us to live there." Given that my mother didn't work and my father's income wasn't enough to cover major repairs, they saw no other option but to move into the house I had inherited from my Uncle Michael. Faced with their difficult situation, I couldn't just leave them homeless, so I reluctantly agreed to let them move in. Once they settled in, however, they didn't hesitate to make sarcastic remarks. "Hey, Lisa, you're already in your 40s, aren't you? Don't you have any plans of getting married?" They would taunt, always pointing out my single status. I find great satisfaction in my work and am truly content with my life, yet the people around me often express concerns about my relationship prospects. They suggest that I should follow in my sister's footsteps, who has taken a different path in life. Contrary to their expectations, my sister's married life has faced its own challenges. Nevertheless, I remain unfazed, reassuring them that I'm perfectly fine with how things are. It was during one such discussion that my mother, who had been eavesdropping, decided to butt in. "Hey, don't speak ill of your sister like that. Unlike you, she's married and even has a stable job at a company," she interrupted, defending my own choices. I replied, "I might not be married, but I am doing a respectable job too." My mother wasn't convinced and continued her criticisms. "You're always just messing around on your computer. You're probably making money through some shady means, aren't you?" she accused. Despite their doubts and criticism, I continue to live my life according to my own terms, valuing my independence and the career I've built. I quickly responded, "Shady? I'm earning my living honestly through legitimate work. There's no need to worry. My mother was not pleased with my reply and scolded me sharply. How dare you talk back to your mother? You really are the complete opposite of your sister. This constant comparison of me to my sister by our parents was something I had become used to. While my sister worked a temporary office job, I had chosen a different path that allowed me to work from home. Although I knew our parents' generation might not fully understand the concept of remote work, it still hurt to be consistently belittled. However, one day while I was preparing dinner, instead of my perpetually idle parents, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. To my surprise, it was my sister Carol, burdened with a massive amount of luggage. "Hub, Carol, what's going on?" "It's been a while." I greeted her, taken aback by her sudden appearance. "This is Sutton, but I'll be living in this house from today," Carol replied with urgency. Baffled, I blurted out, "Living here from today? I didn't hear anything about this." Carol explained, "Didn't Mom and Dad tell you? I got divorced, so I'll be counting on you from today." Despite my initial shock, I tried to maintain a welcoming demeanor. Ignoring my startled reaction, Carol trudged upstairs and promptly claimed an empty room as her own. My parents sided with her, and I found myself powerless to object. From that moment on, my stress levels began to rise. Carol, after her divorce, had quit her job and spent her days speaking ill of me with our mother. "Hey, Mom, isn't this dress cute?" Carol would ask, showing off her latest shopping find. "Oh, yes, indeed, Carol, you're so pretty. It will definitely suit you," our mother would respond enthusiastically. Then Carol would turn to me and remark, "Do you think so too? It's totally not something Lisa would wear, right?" Unable to escape their critical gaze, I continued to live my life without reacting to their taunts. Despite the desire to retaliate, I realized that it would only play into their hands, so I remained steadfast and unresponsive to their attempts to provoke me. One fine day, I knew I had to stay strong and keep focusing on my own happiness regardless of the negativity around me. I found myself in a truly heartwarming situation when one of my closest friends became the proud owner of a litter of 4 adorable puppies. This significant event sparked a series of changes that would enrich my life tremendously. The moment I saw those precious pups, I felt a deep connection. After careful thought, I decided to adopt a little black Chihuahua from the litter. I named him Charlie. Charlie was a bundle of joy, his round eyes sparkling with mischief every time he looked at me. His tail wagged so vigorously it seemed it might just detach in his excitement. I had always dreamed of owning a Chihuahua since I was a child, and finally having Charlie by my side brought immense happiness into my life. This was particularly true because I often worked from home, and Charlie's companionship provided much-needed relief from the loneliness of my remote work days. "From today onwards, you're Charlie, okay?" "Woof," I declared to him, solidifying our bond. Caught up in my excitement, I didn't discuss my decision to bring Charlie home with my family. After all, it was my house, and I was fully responsible for all the expenses related to Charlie's care and well-being. I saw no reason for them to object. However, as soon as I introduced Charlie to my family, my parents and my sister Carol began voicing their concerns. They expressed their displeasure, upset that they hadn't been informed about my intention to get a dog. Some even mentioned their dislike for the potential odors that dogs could bring into a home. My parents and Carol were quite vocal in their disapproval. I recall, "Hey, we didn't hear anything about you getting a dog," they protested. "Dogs smell, don't they?" "I hate odors," someone added. "Lisa, how could you just bring a dog home without consulting us?" They continued to scold me. Despite their complaints, I stood my ground and firmly defended my decision. It's my house, and I decided that Charlie and I needed each other. His presence here is a source of joy, not a cause for complaints, I asserted. I was prepared to show them that Charlie's presence was a blessing, hoping they would soon see him as I did. I explained to them that Charlie wasn't some random street dog. He was a gift from a friend. I also emphasized that I was the one covering all the expenses for Charlie's care and maintenance, so they really had no grounds to complain. What I choose to keep in my house is my business, I added firmly. If you have any complaints, you're free to leave. Initially, their annoyance was clear. They were visibly frustrated and upset. However, within just a few hours, a miraculous change occurred. Charlie's undeniable cuteness completely won them over. They couldn't stop doting on him, playfully asking, "Aren't you cute? Are you mommies, daddies, or are you sisters? Look over here, sweetheart." It was as though their frustration had just evaporated into thin air. My entire family had fallen head over heels in love with Charlie, and his presence managed to bring about a remarkable transformation in their attitudes. From that point on, our home was filled with constant adoration for Charlie. Thanks to him, the previous hostility directed towards me began to fade, and I was able to enjoy relatively calm and harmonious days with my family. However, as life tends to go, a disruptive event occurred one day that broke the peace we had come to enjoy. While I was out running an errand, I received an urgent call from my sister, Carol. She sounded agitated and demanded, "Come back home now." Startled by her urgent shout, I asked her what had happened. She unleashed her frustration over the phone, shouting back, "It's not what happened, it's what Charlie did. He did his business on my clothes. What if they smell?" I tried to calm her down, saying, "Oh, just wash them quickly and they'll be fine. And isn't it your fault for leaving your clothes all over the floor?" Carol retorted, "What? It's my fault. It's your poor training that's to blame." I sighed, realizing that this was just a minor hiccup. "Enough, Carol. Charlie is still a puppy, you know. If you take him out for a walk, he won't do his business at home. You said you were excited to walk Charlie today, didn't you? Did you actually take him?" I had originally planned to take Charlie for a walk later in the day, but I didn't realize this decision would trigger a series of events that would throw my family into chaos. The core issue was that I hadn't fully trained Charlie, our beloved dog, and the consequences of this oversight were about to unravel. When I returned home, I walked into a home filled with tension. My sister, Carol, clearly furious, confronted me immediately. Her anger was evident, and it was clear she had already briefed our parents about the mishap as they too glared at me. Standing amid Carol's now soiled clothes, scattered across the floor, Carol distraughtly threw the soiled garments at me in a fit of frustration. "I'm going to charge you for the cleaning costs," she declared angrily. "Why should I pay?" I retorted. "It's because you didn't take him for a walk and left your clothes all over the floor." My parents quickly joined in, urging me to take responsibility. "Lisa, shouldn't you at least apologize to Carol?" they suggested. "All of this happened because of that Charlie you brought home." As the accusations continued, I couldn't help but defend Charlie. "Can't we give Charlie some slack? Puppies are like babies. They make mistakes sometimes." But my family seemed determined to blame me and Charlie. This situation only happened because of this stupid dog. My sister snapped again. "Lisa, you made the right choice by not getting married. If you became a mother, I doubt you'd raise a decent child." Her comments grew harsher and my frustration mounted. "How dare you say something like that?" I exclaimed. "If you had taken him for walks properly and kept the house tidy, none of this would have happened." Finally, my sister reached her limit. She pointed at me and declared, "I can't take this anymore." The situation had escalated beyond simple pet mishaps to personal attacks, revealing deeper family tensions. Despite the hostility, I knew it was essential to remain calm and address each issue thoughtfully, prioritizing Charlie's training and our family's need for better communication and understanding. "I don't need you or this dumb dog. Get out of this house." The words struck me like a ton of bricks. "What?" I stammered in disbelief. "Didn't you hear me?" I said, get out. We don't need a home-wrecking freeloader here." My sister continued harshly. Her accusation cut deeply, especially since she knew all too well that I was currently without a job. I was stunned. Who did they think was covering the household expenses? It was me. As I stood there bewildered by my sister's outrageous claims, even my parents joined in supporting her view. "That's right, Lisa. Leave this house. Your presence only makes us feel worse," they echoed. I had reached my breaking point. "You're all jinxes. Just get out," they shouted together, their voices echoing off the walls. "That's it. I've reached my limit." I finally burst out. "If this is how it's going to be, just wait." With that declaration, I decided to take control of the situation. I quickly packed my belongings and left the house with Charlie wrapped in a towel. As I walked away, thoughts of revenge flickered through my mind, but I knew this saga was far from over. A few days later, as expected, my sister reached out to me in a panic. "Lisa, help! What happened to the house all of a sudden?" she asked, her voice filled with anxiety and desperation. Curious about this new twist in our ongoing family drama, I inquired, "What happened? Why do we suddenly have to leave?" "We were told to leave by the end of this month," she replied, her voice trembling with stress. The realization hit me hard, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the universe's way of teaching my family a lesson about compassion and understanding. "What's the problem here? Why do we suddenly have to leave?" Carol's voice quivered as she struggled to grasp the situation. "I've made the decision to sell the house," I told her firmly. I stated it calmly, and Carol froze, disbelief clear in her trembling voice. "What do you mean you've decided to sell it? You don't have the authority," she stammered. "A month ago, the house officially became mine, a fact I had kept to myself until now." "Yes, I received the house from Uncle Michael, and the title is in my name," I revealed, causing Carol to react with shock. "You're kidding, right?" Her skepticism was evident. "Even if the title was transferred to you by Uncle Michael, you can't just sell it like that," she argued. "I understand your concern," I reassured her, "but right after you told me to leave, I consulted with Uncle Michael. He made it clear that the house is mine now, Lisa. He told me to do what I want and suggested I get away from the family as soon as possible." Carol was taken aback, struggling to process this unexpected revelation. "What? No way," she muttered. As our conversation continued, I suspected my parents might be listening in through the phone speaker. Soon enough, they began to voice their objections. "Hey, Lisa, cut it out. We have no other place to live if we leave the house," they interjected, trying to appeal to my sense of family loyalty. "That's right, Lisa. It's unthinkable to do this to your own family. If you're a good daughter, show some respect to your parents," they added with a quiet but firm tone. I responded, "Respect? What are you talking about? You've always looked down on me compared to Carol. Who do you think has been supporting your life for the past few years? You all had nowhere to live, so I reluctantly let you stay with me." My parents were momentarily silenced by my strong response. Without waiting for their reply, I contemplated the implications of my decision, ready to enforce the boundaries that were long overdue. "Who treated me and Charlie like nuisances and kicked us out? It was you, wasn't it? Trying to drive out the original resident is shameless." My father responded with a voice full of plea. "Please, Lisa, help us. We're sorry." But I had had enough. "I don't care. Fend for yourselves," I said resolutely. With that, I abruptly ended the call and blocked all my family members' contacts. Charlie, my loyal companion, looked up at me with a worried expression. I held him close and whispered, "I'm sorry, Charlie, for shouting. It's all right now. I will protect you." I felt relieved that I had rescued Charlie from a family that had mistreated him. In the days that followed, I learned that my parents and sister had been forced to leave the house at the last minute, despite their desperate attempts to cling to it. My father's meager income and my unemployed mother and sister made it impossible for them to maintain a decent life. Rumors circulated that my sister was constantly pressured by my parents to find a job, and their family relationships deteriorated further each day. While I had no interest in their living conditions, it was clear that their standard of living had plummeted since my departure. It was a classic case of reaping what they had sown, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. Meanwhile, I enjoyed a fulfilling life in my new pet-friendly apartment, free to work on my terms without anyone complaining. All my earnings were solely for myself and Charlie. I was genuinely content with my life. "Charlie, let's go to the dog park today," I said with a smile. Charlie seemed livelier, perhaps because that noisy family was no longer a part of our lives. From that day forward, I was determined to protect Charlie for the rest of our lives and lead a peaceful and happy existence. Hello guys, my name's Ella. I'll start off my little story by saying that I'm using fake names that I made up in my mind. I come from a wealthy family, and so does my husband. In the story, I have a feeling that this might get recognized, and trust me, I have had enough people coming up to me wanting to know all the juicy gossip. I don't want a repeat of that, so I will refer to myself as Ella and my husband as Ken. Ken and I got married after college because we were in love. We also belonged to the same social standing, so it wasn't a problem for us to get married. Ken managed his father's business while I was a stay-at-home wife. I really won't tell you lies by saying that my married life was horrible. Well, with its small ups and downs, it was actually pretty good. We were married blissfully for 3 years before everything went to hell. I noticed that Ken was starting to withdraw a little from me. When I asked about it, he told me that it was work stress. So like a good wife, I took extra care of him to ease his stress. Who knew that Ken had been planning to do something horrible to me? I didn't have a clue of what was about to happen to me in my marriage. This all started when my husband made a very weird declaration. When I married him, I knew that he came from a wealthy family and inherited a lot of assets after his father passed away. Plus, he was all set to inherit more wealth from his mother. I also knew that he was extremely possessive over his assets and didn't want to part with them. Imagine my surprise when he sat me down and told me this. "Ella, I've been thinking about things for a while. You know that I have over 15 properties in several counties." "Yes, you told me about it in the past. What's the matter?" "So I was thinking about transferring the properties to you, all of them." "What? But why would you do that? They are your assets. You don't need to give me anything." "Look, I know they're my assets, but we are married now, so you should have some of it too. I already work a good job and don't need the surplus income anyway. Consider the rent money from these properties to be your allowance. I'm still unsure why you're doing this. Aren't you scared that you will lose ownership of your inheritance?" "Actually, part of the reason is taxes. Since you don't work, you'll be paying less taxes after collecting rent. My job and these properties are making me lose a lot of money in taxes, so this is the best way to avoid that." I was extremely confused and skeptical about Ken's decision. This didn't seem like a good idea to me at all. I mean, his reasons were legit, but I found it hard to believe that he would just give me his assets for free. I was feeling a little suspicious of this entire thing. Mostly, I chalked it up to a prank and just went with what Ken said. After all, I couldn't stop him from signing his properties to me. I really did think that he was joking or pranking me. I was not prepared for my husband to call his best friend, SAEF, to our house the next day. Let me tell you about SEF. He's actually a lawyer who specializes in property laws. He has been my husband's best friend since kindergarten. At first, I thought that he was in on this prank. Then I saw that they were both serious. They sat me down and said, "So I take it that Ken has told you about his decision. He plans to transfer the house and 15 other properties of his to your name." Come on, guys. Is this a prank or something? We are not seriously doing this. This is not a prank or a joke, Ella. I did tell you my reasoning for transferring the properties to you. I intend to follow through with my decision, and that's why I'm here. Ella, I have prepared all the papers so that you know what's going on. Ken is a good husband and doesn't want to keep you in the dark. That's right. I want you to know everything, Ella. You do have to know your assets so that you can collect their rent on time. CF has already prepared all the documents. I was still pretty much in shock at this whole thing. At this point, both of them had convinced me that they meant business. I did read through the documents and found them pretty legit. Yes, I did have some knowledge of laws. I gave the papers back to SEF and saw that Ken swiftly put his signature on it. I really didn't know what to think. I was honored that Ken trusted me so much and was touched by his love for me. I quickly went to the kitchen to make coffee for all of us. When I was returning to the living room, this is the conversation I heard between Ken and SEF. God, I really didn't think Ella would be so stupid. I mean, I know she's dumb, but not that dumb. How the hell did she think that I would just give her my properties? You should be happy about this. Ella's stupidity made it easy for us to fool her. No one else would buy your excuse in any way. That is true, Seth. Thank God I married a dumb witch. It was easy to convince her that I gave her my properties. I will leave soon, and after 5 months I'll be back to sue her. I bet her parents will get involved, and I will end up getting a seamless divorce. Yeah, after you get that divorce, you'll be able to marry the girl of your dreams. See, I gave you the right idea to make Ella seem like a fraud. This way, you'll be able to avoid paying alimony. We live in an at-fault state, after all. The case won't even go to court. CEF, I can bet you $1,000 that Ella's parents will give me money and beg me to withdraw the case. Having a fraud case on their daughter will be bad for their image. They will agree to all divorce conditions to save face. And Mom also won't be mad at me for divorcing Ella. We did come up with a great plan, you know. Just that you have to be careful. Don't let Ella find out that you are having an affair. You were leaving to see her, after all. Don't worry about that, Seth. I'm not a new player. I will tell Ella that I have a business trip coming, and then I will ghost her for 5 months. Then I will make up some excuses. Ken and Seth kept laughing about their plans while I remained frozen in my spot. I heard every word they said and knew the truth of the situation. My hands were shaking, so I quickly returned to the kitchen to compose myself. I had tears in my eyes, and I didn't know what to think anymore. My own husband was cheating on me and planning to trap me in his schemes. No, he didn't love me at all. He didn't trust me blindly. All this was a trap to make me look bad and give him a smooth outlet to divorce me. Guys, I can't tell you how hard it was for me to hold myself together at that point. Still, I didn't want them to see how broken I was. I actually put on a poker face and gave Seth and Ken their coffee. Then I faked a headache and went to my room. I immediately called my mother-in-law to tell her about what was going on. She was a lady of morals and ethics, and that's why Ken was scared about pissing her off. I called Daisy, my mother-in-law, and told her everything. I was literally sobbing while recounting all that happened. Daisy listened to me patiently and then said, "My son has crossed all limits today. After he married you, I thought that he had finally grown some sense. Now I see that I completely failed to raise him right. He is an abomination to me. His father would be rolling in his grave right now. Daisy, what do I do now? I want to confront him and destroy everything around me, but I know that this will be a stupid idea." Of course it will be a stupid idea, Ella. You don't really have concrete proof of anything right now. If you confront him now, he will manage to clear any evidence of his affair. Then he might paint you out to be crazy. That is true, Daisy. It did cross my mind. Trust me, I don't want to stay one more moment in this house anymore. I'm disgusted by Ken. I'm not sad anymore. I'm just super angry. That's good, Ella. You need to be more angry than sad. My imbecile son has played you really bad. You can't let him get away with it." "I won't let him get away with this, Daisy. I might be soft-hearted, but I can be vengeful when necessary. I do have a plan, Daisy. It just came to my mind. I'll tell you once I compose myself a little better." Daisy encouraged me to make a plan for revenge. God, I absolutely love this woman. She promised to support me no matter what. I was a little relieved to know that at least someone was on my side. I also informed my own parents to prepare them for what was about to come. They were shocked and super angry as well. While all this was going on, Ken came into our room and said, "Ella, aren't you happy that I transferred my properties to you, see? I love and trust you so much." "Unhappy, Ken. I guess it showed me how much you actually love me. I needed to know that." "I am glad to know that, Ella. So I have to fly out for some business tomorrow. I have come to tell you about that. I'll be at a ton of meetings and stuff, so you don't have to worry when you don't hear back from me. You won't call at all. How long will you be gone?" "I'm not sure. I'll try to call, but I can't promise anything. This is an important business trip. I don't want to tell anyone anything until the deals are finalized, so don't tell Mom about this. I want to surprise her." I knew why Ken didn't want me to tell his mother, and I also knew why he didn't give me many details of the trip. In the past, I would have been worried about not knowing everything, but now I don't care anymore. I knew that he was going on vacation with his mistress, and there was no business trip. Ken could try and fool me as much as he wanted. I already knew his plans. I wished him well and went back to my work. This time, I called a private investigating agency to follow my husband and collect proof of his affair. I also accessed the CCTV footage of our living room to record the conversation Ken and Seth had that day. Yes, we have high-quality cameras and full audio recordings as well. Ken didn't remember that I could easily access footage and save it. He thought that I wouldn't suspect anything, and by the time I find something fishy, the recordings will be automatically deleted. He had no idea how wrong he was. The next morning, Ken left after saying his usual goodbyes. He did keep in touch for a few days before just disappearing completely. No one could get in contact with him, so he had essentially gone missing. My private investigator later informed me that he was vacationing in another country with his affair partner and was using a different phone number there. He was actually in freaking Europe having the time of his life and spending our money on another woman. I was fuming. I showed Daisy all the proof, and together we knew what to do. As promised, Ken didn't come back for 5 freaking months. He went on a vacation with his mistress and then was living with her in a different state. He actually bought her a house there, and they were presenting themselves as a happy couple. The more pictures I saw, the angrier I got. All my love for Ken had drained away. Meanwhile, I continued to collect rent money from the properties he signed over to me. They were a bunch of office spaces, so the income was good. As instructed by Ken, I went to all those properties and told them to send me the rent money. They didn't question it since Ken had informed them about a change. I was happy getting an extra income while plotting revenge against my horrible husband. When 5 months were up, he returned fully prepared with court papers and all. Guys, this man didn't even have the guts to come back home. He sent his stupid friend to come and talk to me. I got an email that I was getting sued by Ken for wrongfully taking rent payments for his client. I didn't reply to it and just informed my mother-in-law about it. That day, Daisy called me to her house along with Ken to talk. I went to Daisy's place and saw them waiting for me. As soon as I walked in, Ken got up from his seat with an angry expression and said, "What are you doing here, Ella? How dare you show me your face after you cheated me out of?" Sit down, Ken. Why are you making a fuss? Let's talk about this calmly, Mom. How can you take her side? She's a thief. I already told you what she has done. She needs to be in jail, and I have already sued her. I know you sued me, Ken. I got the legal notice in my mail yesterday. Why didn't you come home and confront me? Why hide from me, Ken? I didn't come home because I don't want to see your face anymore. You betrayed me, Ella. This is horrible. Oh, so you didn't come home because I took your rent money? But isn't that what you asked me to do? What nonsense, Ella. Why would I ever ask you to do that? I never said anything you didn't. Well, let's rewind a little. So you were telling me that you didn't tell me about transferring your properties to me before you left for your little vacation all around the world, Ken. Ken looked a little flustered when I mentioned that I wasn't supposed to know about the trip with his mistress. After all, so he was confused about how I got to know about it. Since Daisy was present and listening intently, Ken was trying hard to keep his expressions neutral and not freak out. I never said those things, Ella. And what vacation? I was gone for work. You don't recall anything. Well, then let me make things easier for you to remember. Remember how you and Seth showed me papers that you would let me get your properties, then you left for work abroad. Don't drag Seth into this, Ella. He didn't do anything. You're making up stories. I don't even care, actually. Once you're in court, we will see what happens. You want me to go to court, Ken? Well, I don't think that will happen. What do you mean, Ella? Ken seemed to be a little confused and even scared of what I was going to say. I think he was getting onto the fact that maybe I knew something. Daisy was also not looking very pleased, and the atmosphere was tense. So I smiled a little and said, "Thank you for the properties, Ken, but I knew all about your plan. I knew that you were trying to trick me so that you could divorce me for financial fraud." What? No. Why would I do that? This makes no sense. I also know why you did it, Ken. I believe it's because you want to marry your mistress who accompanied you on your 5-month trip around the world. Ken now looked absolutely dumbstruck at my revelation. He looked at me and Daisy, trying to gauge our reactions. He knew that he had been caught. Still, this idiot tried to defend himself and said, "These are all lies. You're just mad that your scam was caught. Don't make up lies about me, Ella. This is insane. Are these really lies, Ken?" "Mom, what do you mean?" "Of course, these are lies. I would never do something like this." "Oh, really, Ken? Is she lying or are you?" "My mother-in-law is a champion." She straight away called Ken's bull and didn't beat around the bush. She had already seen all the proof and was exceptionally mad at her son. Meanwhile, her son was now shaking and stuttering. He said, "No, Mom, I didn't do anything." "Why would you say that?" "Shut up, Ken. I know, and I have seen all the proof of your nasty plan." "That's right, Ken. I showed her the CCTV footage of our home where you and Seth had been laughing about your plan against me. We also know that you had an affair and took her on a grand trip in these past 5 months. We hired a private investigator and found out. We have all the proof we need." Ken continued to shake and his eyes went wide when we told him how we knew about his plan. The fact that we had so much evidence against him was something he had never predicted. He was super scared and kept shaking his head, trying to form a reply. It was funny to see him so scared. What made it satisfying was the fact that he had planned for me to react this way. This man was a monster. I said, "What happened?" "Ken, Cat got your tongue." I'm sorry." "Just enough, Ken. I don't want any more lies coming out of your mouth. You have crossed all limits of being a horrible human." "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I just made a mistake." Calling this a mistake would be an understatement, Ken. I can't even look at you right now. Not only did you have an affair, but you also tried to scam your own wife. This is just nasty. Mom, I'm sorry. Ella, I'm so sorry. I will take back the legal notice and I will end my affair. This was all a stupid mistake. This wasn't a stupid mistake, Ken. You meticulously planned this to trap me. There will be consequences for you now. Ken absolutely freaked out and started to beg for forgiveness. He knew that his mother was super angry, and she had a lot of power over his future and finances. So, Ken was really starting to panic about what we would do to him. Now he was right to be afraid because we did have some grand plans in our minds. Daisy said, "Oh, Ella." "Oh, Ella is right about that, Ken. We do have some severe consequences for you. I'm actually thinking about disowning you completely and helping Ella take you to court." No, please don't do this, Ella. Please. Let's talk and figure out a solution. I'm telling you I will withdraw the case. I will also end my affair. I'm not happy with that, Ken. I need more. I need you to transfer your $115 properties to me for real. Then I will think about it. Ken more than agreed to do that and left hurriedly. I gave him time because I had more revenge planned for him. I sat there and laughed with Daisy, talking about our grand plan about Ken. He had no idea what we were going to do to him. I will tell you what happened next in a little detail. Ken made Seth actually file fresh papers for the property transfer. He also withdrew the case he had against me. From what my private investigator told me, he seemed to have broken up with his mistress, who then threw a fit and told everyone about it. It was just glorious because it came right after the property transfer was finalized. Once I made sure that the properties were really in my name, I served Ken's divorce papers. He was shocked because he wasn't expecting them at all. He thought that all would be well if he tried to backtrack and undo his wrongs. Sad for him, the damage was done. Ken tried to fight me for the divorce but relented when I told him that I had proof of his affair. He had nothing in his hands anymore. Along with getting his 15 properties, I also got a huge chunk of his savings and fat alimony from the divorce settlements. Daisy made him comply with everything by threatening to disown him, so Ken had no option but to comply. In the end, he ended up getting divorced and Daisy cut his inheritance in half. Anyway, she was a good mother-in-law and wanted to punish her son for what he did to me. Ken is now living alone since I got our house as well. What can I say? I got a better lawyer than him and had too much evidence against him. So I happily came out of the marriage while getting a lot of money and assets, while Ken lost almost everything in one go. Ken is still pretty upset about the whole thing and has a strained relationship with his family. His friendship with Seth is also coming to an end since everyone knows he helped my ex-husband with his dirty plan. Seth is also facing a lot of backlash, and his office gave him a warning for malpractice. Ken has become extremely alone and is trying his best to cope. He lost a lot of weight and doesn't look happy anymore. He tried to fool around and mess with me, but he got the short end of the stick in return. I hope he learned his lesson and will never try to do this again. My mother-in-law told me something surprising. She said we're going to live together now. We turned the house into 2 separate homes to make it easier. Is the house in your name, Emma? Sorry you ask, but can you pay the $80,000 bill for the changes? My mother-in-law and husband thought it was funny, but I felt determined. I was going to tell them something important, even though my husband didn't know yet. I have proof, too. My name is Emma Davis, and I'm 26 years old. I live a little away from the city in a place surrounded by nature. I work in an office and draw pictures for fun. Recently, I've been sharing my drawings online and reading the comments people leave. My husband, who is 3 years older than me, and I have been happily married and living in our beloved old farmhouse since we got married. But there's been a visitor who comes by once a month since then, and they always give me a headache. Emma, I'm here. Please open up quickly. I hurried to the front door. I heard the insistent banging. It's my mother-in-law. I'll open it right away, I said, even though there's a doorbell right next to the door. I tried to smile as I opened the sliding door. There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. I saw a tired-looking woman holding a big bag waiting at the door. As she chattered on, I tried to keep up my fake smile. This visitor, who comes once a month, is none other than my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. Since my husband is an only child, she feels it's her duty to look after him even after we got married. She even gives me tips on how to manage the house. Last time she visited, she rearranged the whole fridge, making it a hassle for me to prepare breakfast the next day. I remember my husband telling me before we got married, if my parents ever need care, we'll live together. I hope you understand. I'm disappointed at the thought of leaving our lovely old house when the time comes, but I've accepted it. What bothers me more is the idea of living with my mother-in-law all the time. I feel sorry for my husband, as it's not something I'm looking forward to. Fast forward 2 years into our married life in the farmhouse, my husband told me that his father slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. They'll need our help from now on. Let's live together, just like we talked about before we got married. Yes, I'm worried too, so I think it's a good idea. Can I still do my drawings? I was concerned about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed to move in with them without hesitation. But I was worried that taking care of my in-laws and doing housework might leave me with no time for my drawing hobby. Whether he knew about my worries or not, my husband just said, "I want you to focus on the house," and left for his office. Left alone in my room, I felt like I was giving up on my husband. As I looked through my drawings, I started sorting out my feelings. Just when I had decided to live with them, something unexpected happened. While I was at work, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and got really dizzy. I collapsed. Thankfully, a colleague called an ambulance, and although I wasn't in danger, it turned out I had had a stroke at a young age. After a medical checkup, even though I had been warned about high blood pressure during health checkups before, I regretted not taking it seriously and going to the hospital. From the time I found out about the illness to being hospitalized, including tests, surgery, and recovery, took about 2 months. It all happened so quickly, and I realized my husband showed very little concern for me. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I called my husband with trembling hands, but all I heard was disappointment in his voice, saying, "So, living together, we have to wait, huh?" I couldn't believe he was more worried about living arrangements than my health. Luckily, my father-in-law was still in the hospital with a fracture, so I didn't have to worry about taking care of him. This allowed me to focus on my treatment, which was a silver lining. Plus, since we didn't have kids, that wasn't an added concern. Suddenly, I thought of my mother-in-law always talking about wanting to see her grandchild soon, but I pushed that thought away and grabbed my sketchbook. Lately, I had been too busy with preparations to live with my in-laws and undergoing tests since my stroke to indulge in my favorite pastime of drawing. I knew once I moved in with them, I'd have even less time for it. I decided to view my time in the hospital as a gift of freedom from God and resolved to enjoy my hobby to the fullest once this period was over. I promised myself to give my best to my husband and in-laws, whether it was doing chores or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay flew by, and finally it was time to leave. My husband casually asked if he should pick me up, but I wanted some time alone, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. As I rode the bus, I looked out the window and saw the familiar scenery. I realized I was already near home. The sunlight shining on the lush green leaves was breathtaking, and I felt a mix of emotions, thinking goodbye to this beautiful natural setting. Since my in-laws' house is closer to the city, my life is going to change a lot from now on. Feeling a bit sad, I stepped off the bus at the familiar stop. As I walked towards what was supposed to be my beloved old home, I suddenly froze in astonishment. Instead of the familiar private house I knew so well, there stood a completely unfamiliar house that I had never seen before. After being in the hospital for about 2 months, I double-checked the surrounding buildings and the path I took, wondering if I had somehow gotten a location wrong. But it was no mistake. There was no point in wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the unfamiliar house. A voice I knew well, undoubtedly my husband's, responded with a simple yes. Still feeling confused, I quietly said, "It's Michelle," into the intercom. The front door creaked open and my husband, dressed casually, appeared. "Ah, welcome home. You're back earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up," George said. "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted him, feeling disbelief, noticing his relaxed demeanor, perhaps indicating he had just woken up with his messy hair. Ignoring my anxiousness, George only responded vaguely, "Huh. What's going on? What happened?" without addressing my question. Just then, laughter echoed from inside the house. Unable to believe it, I pushed past my husband and made my way to the living room. Opening the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on a couch, watching TV. She was laughing heartily, holding her stomach. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" I asked, bewildered. "Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone," my mother-in-law said casually. I was puzzled by what my mother-in-law meant by taking care of the house. Did she mean chores? With a sinking feeling, I pressed her on why our old house had changed so much. Without any hint of remorse, she replied, "Well, since we're all going to live together, I thought it would be more comfortable to remodel it into a duplex." The words, "remodeled it into a duplex," kept echoing in my head. My mother-in-law had always been one to meddle in our lives, but I never imagined she would renovate our house without asking. And weren't we supposed to move into my in-laws' house closer to the city center? Every time she visited our old house, she complained about the bugs and the walk from the station. So why all the changes now? "Oh, and if something else important, I have to tell you," my mother-in-law said, switching off the TV with a grin. "The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment?" My mother-in-law chuckled, devoid of any hint of apology. "Ah, it's $80,000, she said, her smile growing wider. "That's the cost of remodeling, and the title to this house comes with it, Michelle." $80,000. Her unexpected words hit me like a punch to the head, and my legs started shaking. I couldn't even find the words to respond as I stared at my mother-in-law, stunned and laughing without a care. My husband appeared at the entrance and slipped into the living room. Seeing him, I instinctively moved towards him, holding on to a faint hope that he would support me. I repeated to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, desperately awaiting his reaction. But all I got from him was a cold reply. "Well, that sounds about right. You'll handle it, won't you?" That's just who he is. When I had a stroke, he cared more about our living arrangements than my health. He's the kind of man who listens to his mother's every word, no matter how absurd. A man who always believes his mother is right. My discomfort and dissatisfaction towards my husband reached a boiling point. Once it overflowed, I was done. With all my heart, I decided I would leave this family behind. "I understand now, George. I'm going to divorce you and your mother, Cecilia." "And no, Cecilia, you can handle the renovation costs on your own," I declared all at once and turned my back on them, intending to leave the room quickly. But they weren't going to let me go so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay," George remarked. "That's right, feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first," added Cecilia. I was astonished by their selfishness. I couldn't help but sigh. I was sure if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory. But I refused to look back. I stood tall and replied, "You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget the ownership has been transferred to you?" I revealed the truth, but they only laughed, thinking I was lying to evade paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, their laughter abruptly stopped, and I could feel their panic gradually setting in. "I don't recall saying such a thing." "There's no proof anyway," George retorted. Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer and a shelf from our old house. "Let's see, it should be somewhere around. Ah, here it is. This is the proof," I said, taking out a document that listed the property and house ownership and showed it to them. When I pointed to the part that showed the ownership was in George's name, his face went pale. "That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000, George exclaimed. I was disgusted by my husband's reaction. He started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. Since a decent conversation seemed impossible, "Let's communicate through lawyers from now on, Cecilia. Your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him," I stated calmly beside my loud husband. I smiled at my mother-in-law, who stood dazed, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, opting instead to communicate formally through a lawyer. Given our strained relationship and the issues with my mother-in-law, the divorce was settled without any problems. Regarding my husband's accusation that changing the property's ownership was fraud, it was determined that it was a mutual decision made when we got married 2 years ago. My lawyer reassured me with a smile that this was neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me disappeared completely. It turned out that I was supposed to foot the bill for renovating the house as soon as I got discharged from the hospital. I couldn't help but appreciate the well-executed, spiteful move of pushing me into a difficult situation just after I had undergone surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his responsibility to pay the hefty renovation costs, and he ended up cornering himself. Moreover, I was able to secure alimony after the divorce was finalized. While I was in the midst of the legal battle with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was directly involved in this matter, but it couldn't be denied that for 2 years after our marriage, he had turned a blind eye to his wife and indifferent husband. After briefly replying to Bob's message, I made the decision to cut all ties with my old family and start afresh. Since then, my health has been gradually improving, and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations, but I always felt restricted by my husband's presence. Now I can immerse myself in drawing whenever and however I want. Initially, drawing was just a hobby, but now I receive job offers through the social networking site where I post my illustrations. I spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure these days. My current dream is to buy an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town using the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio there. Today I'm taking the first step towards realizing that dream by heading to see an old farmhouse. As I gaze out at the scenery from the bus, I can't help but think back to the day I left the hospital, the day that changed my life forever. The natural scenery outside remains the same as it was that day, but my feelings are clearer now, and I'm filled with excitement for the new life that awaits me. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright and dazzling.